I'm Martin Whitaker, CEO of Diurnal. Always a pleasure to present Diurnal to this audience. It's about a year since we last presented, and actually it's been a very significant year for Diurnal in that we've hit all the milestones what we set out to achieve from last year. Our lead product has now been approved in Europe, and we are now revenue generating. So actually one of the very few UK biotech companies that's actually taken a pharmaceutical product from concept all the way through to regulatory approval and is now generating revenue. So in terms of a bit of background about Diurnal, we were founded in 2004 as a spin-out from the University of Sheffield. We were listed on AIM in December 2015, share price 144. That's our current share price now. We are approximately 120 million market cap, and we're in a strong financial position. At the end of the calendar year 2017, we had £14 million in cash, and that was supplemented with a fundraising in April of this year of 10.5 million, which broadened out the share register, bringing on 14 new institutional investors. In terms of our key investors, these are all investors such as IP Group, Invesco, Finance Wales, that are with us for the long term, so we have a strong investor base. And I think importantly in terms of the operations of a company, we have a very experienced team. So we have Peter Allen, who is very well known in the city. He's led several pharmaceutical companies to a successful exit, namely Celtec and Pro-Strachan. I'm the CEO. I'm a scientist by background. My most notable achievement outside of Diurnal has been to develop and commercialise a product called Plenacol, which is a high-dose vitamin D, which is only available on prescription, and that is now the highest selling vitamin D in the UK. I'm joined here this evening by Richard Bungay, our CFO, sat in the front row. Richard has worked for both small and large companies in the sector and has over 20 years experience in biotech. And finally we have Richard Ross. He's the founder of a company. He's an endocrinologist. He's a medic by background, and he's still involved with the company as the chief scientific officer. So in terms of our investment summary, we are a specialty pharmaceutical company. We're focused very much on endocrinology, so that's hormone replacement. I'll touch upon what that is in a minute. It is a large market, approximately $10 billion in both Europe and the US. And initially we're targeting one particular group of diseases which have been typically underserved in the marketplace, and those are diseases of one specific hormone called cortisol and diseases of cortisol deficiency. And we have two products that target these diseases of cortisol deficiency. Our first product is a pediatric product called Al-Kindi. It was recently approved in Europe in February of this year, launched in Germany just last month, and is already generating revenues. Market size is around $80 million US in both Europe and in the US. Our second product is an adult product called Chronocort, market size around $400 million. And this is currently in late stage phase 3 clinical trials in Europe. These are due to complete in Q3 of this year and will read out in Q4 of this year. Now importantly for both Infocort and Chronocort, we have a real opportunity to commercialise these products ourselves. And the reason for that is that the prescribers, the endocrinologists that treat patients and prescribe these drugs, are clustered around specialist centres, and these tend to be larger university-type hospitals. So to give you an idea of how many there are, if you look at the big EU5, there are around 120 such centres in the big EU5, and therefore with a very modest sales team, perhaps 20 to 30 reps at peak for both Al-Kindi and Chronocort, we can actively target these centres and retain the full value of our products within the company and for our shareholders. Further afield and outside of Europe, we're seeking commercial partners for the US, and in terms of the rest of the world, we've already entered into a couple of marketing and distribution agreements in Israel, Australia and New Zealand. In terms of our commercial exclusivity, we have very robust commercial exclusivity in the marketplace. We heard Craig talk about orphan drug designations. These diseases that we're targeting are orphan diseases or rare diseases, and this affords 10 years market exclusivity in Europe, post-market authorisation, and 7 years market exclusivity in the US. Beyond the orphan drug, we have a wholly owned Diurnal patent portfolio, which extends this exclusivity period all the way out to 2034 for Al-Kindi and 2033 for Chronocort. And we have an earlier stage product pipeline which is entering clinical trials. So with those attributes, it's our vision to become a world-leading endocrinology company. And the opportunity that we see is all around the endocrine system. So the endocrine system and the hormones that control it are really essential to life, and they control a wide range of bodily functions from growth, sexual development, and metabolism. And unfortunately, if you are defective or cannot produce a hormone, then this often leads to chronic diseases which are often lifelong and have serious health impacts for the patient. So the hormone that we all will have heard of is insulin. The disease is diabetes, and indeed this is an area where large pharma has been focused on for many, many years. It's a huge market, over $50 billion per annum. However, if you look at the right-hand side of a Venn diagram, then you see there's a multitude of diseases that have traditionally gone underserved. And certainly what we do at Diurnal, we spend a lot of our time speaking to patients, to patient groups and to clinicians, and actually we've identified over 160 diseases, over here, that are underserved and where patient needs are going unmet. And that's a real opportunity for Diurnal to operate in this space. Being mindful of our size, we can't tackle all of these diseases all at once, and therefore we focused on diseases of cortisol deficiency. So slide 9 just gives a snapshot of our development pipeline. I'll talk in a minute about Al-Kindi and Chronocort. Initially, we're focusing on a rare genetic disease called Congenital Adrenal Hyperplasia, and that's a market worth approximately $500 million per annum. But once these products are approved, it opens up very lucrative or potentially lucrative markets of related diseases of cortisol deficiency, which are worth some $2.7 billion. And then we have our valuable pipeline of products just coming into the clinic now. So focusing in on diseases of cortisol deficiency, cortisol is an essential hormone for life. If you don't have cortisol on board, you will die. And unfortunately for patients that cannot produce cortisol, they'll need replacement every day for the rest of their lives. The replacement typically comes as hydrocortisone, which is the synthetic version of cortisol, and it's taken orally. There are two types of cortisol deficiency. The first is a disease called adrenal insufficiency, and this is where you lose the ability to produce cortisol during your lifetime. The typical symptoms are that you suffer from chronic fatigue. 50% of these patients can't work, and really you are at risk of what's called an adrenal crisis and death if you don't have enough cortisol on board. The second disease that we're focusing on is a disease called Congenital Adrenal Hyperplasia, or CAH for short. And this is a disease that presents at birth. You have two issues with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Firstly, you have the symptoms of adrenal insufficiency, so the chronic fatigue. But secondly, you have build-up of sex hormones or androgens in the body. And these cause damage to the patient's body on a daily basis. So for example, if you are a little girl that's born with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you're exposed to all these testosterone-like molecules. Little girls may be virilized at birth, so little girls will have ambiguous genitalia, so little girls will look like little boys. Both little boys and little girls will go through puberty incredibly early on in life, perhaps the ages of 5 or 6. So you'll grow very quickly as very young children. But when it comes to the teenage years where puberty should occur, actually growth is turned off, and these patients will become shorter than normal as adults, and in adulthood they'll have continued complications in terms of their fertility and metabolism, and ultimately this patient group will die some 7 years younger than the normal population. And really what we're trying to achieve here at Diurnal is for the first time to treat this patient group with effective treatments all the way from birth all the way through to old age. So if we look at our value inflection points coming up over the next 3 to 4 years, I'm going to talk about Al-Kindi. That's already on the market in Europe. We're just about to complete the phase 3 program in the US and then submit for regulatory approval in across the pond. Estimated approval is around 2020 in the US. We'll talk about Chronocort in a minute, and again, this is about to complete its pivotal phase 3 trial in Europe, and again, we anticipate approval in 2020, and then this opens up the opportunity to use the same products but in different indications, the so-called adrenal insufficiency indication, particularly in the US. Competition in these niche areas is extremely low. In the US, we have no competitor products at all for adrenal insufficiency. In Europe, we have only one competitor product, which is a product called Plenadren. It's not widely marketed in Europe. However, it does provide us with a benchmark price of around $6,300 per patient per annum, and that is a price that we have achieved with Al-Kindi here in Europe. However, in our first indication of this rare disease, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, the genetic disease, we have no competition in Europe and very few competitors in the US who are very much behind us in the development pathway. So if you recall about orphan drug designation, it's all about first to market. These guys are significantly behind us. We're about to start a phase 3 study in the US. These guys have only just completed phase 2. It's a very favourable competitive environment. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about our two lead products. So firstly, Al-Kindi. So Al-Kindi is the first licensed treatment for paediatric adrenal insufficiency, including AI, that has been developed specifically for children. So although hydrocortisone has been around for around 60 years, there's actually been very little innovation in hydrocortisone treatment during that time. And these young children diagnosed with this disease take crushed adult tablets, and you can see an example here taken from Germany. This is real patient medication. The hydrocortisone tablets are crushed. They're all supposed to be of the same dose. You can quite clearly see here by eye that they're not. We've carried out detailed studies to show that over 25% of the medication is out of specification. And this is the life-saving medication that children have been taking from birth for the past 60 years. And one of the hypotheses is that actually it's this poor medication that children receive from birth results in some of the complications in adulthood. But the key opportunity for Diurnal here was that actually, although hydrocortisone has been around for 60 years, no one ever applied for the license for oral hydrocortisone in young children, and that's what we've developed in Al-Kindi. It's a granule formulation that can be easily sprinkled directly into the child's mouth, or for children that can take food, it can be sprinkled onto food and taken. So it's basically beads of drug within a capsule. Each bead has a taste masking layer, so when hydrocortisone is crushed, it's intensely bitter. So we've alleviated that to improve compliance. And it comes in flexible doses, 0.5, 1, 2 and 5 milligrams, which are tailored to the child as it grows. To give you an example of the generic hydrocortisone that's available, the smallest unit dose is only 10 milligrams in Europe, which is completely unsuitable for these young children. So we provided the first metered dose hydrocortisone for these children. As I mentioned, this product was approved in February of this year. The launch occurred in Germany just a few weeks ago, and market access plans are in place for timely launches across the rest of Europe in the coming months. Importantly, the basis of approval in Europe, what's called a Pediatric Use Market Authorisation, or PUMA, and this affords 10 years market and data exclusivity in Europe. So for Al-Kindi, we have exclusivity all the way out to 2028 for this product, all the way out to, using the PUMA alone, 2034 if we take our granted patents into consideration. In terms of our commercialization strategy, as I mentioned, we are commercializing this product ourselves. We are using a contract sales team provided by Ashfield. So although approval in Europe is on a centralized basis, so in theory you can market to all 28 countries from now, actually reimbursement is carried out on a national basis. And working with an organisation like Ashfield that provides reps and medical science liaison staff to us enables us to flexibly roll out our sales team as we get pricing and reimbursement across Europe. And this team really supplements our very experienced in-house commercial team. We have Mike With, who's our commercial director, 20 years experience in taking specialty pharmaceutical products to market with Chiesi, Shire and BioMarin. We also have a very experienced commercial medic in Dr. John Porter, importantly a paediatric endocrinologist. He's treated these patients that we're targeting, and we're really marketing to his network. In terms of the European commercial organisation, we really see this now as a very valuable asset to us, not only to commercialise our own products that we're bringing through the pipeline, but also we're becoming a potential attractive partner to, for example, US companies that don't want to set up their sales force in Europe, but want to bring their products across the pond to us. And importantly, the same commercial infrastructure that we've put in place for Al-Kindi will be the same commercial infrastructure that we put in place for Chronocort, but we'll use for Chronocort once that product is approved in Europe. So Chronocort is our adult product, and it's targeting the same diseases but in adults. And here, the issue for patients is slightly different. In healthy individuals, in normal individuals, we have a very distinct circadian or about the day rhythm of cortisol, which is shown here in the orange line. It's important for health. And if you have a disease such as congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you do not have this rhythm, you have a flat line. And the real goal for Chronocort is that we replace cortisol in the body that mimics this circadian rhythm here to, one, replace cortisol so you don't get the symptoms of adrenal insufficiency, and secondly, to be able to control androgens, these sex hormones, over a whole 24-hour period. So Chronocort is what's called a modified release hydrocortisone. Again, it's beads of drug within a capsule. And the features of Chronocort are it has a delayed release feature. So when you take Chronocort in what we call a toothbrush regimen, last thing at night, first thing in the morning, there's no release from the beads for about 3 to 4 hours. Chronocort then begins to strike off around 3 o'clock in the morning to give you an important peak on waking, and a second dose taken first thing in the morning then gives you coverage of cortisol throughout the day. This is data taken from our from our phase 2 study carried out at the National Institutes of Health in the US, arguably one of the world leading centres into this disease. And what we showed is that we took all comers on their standard treatment regimen. We switched them over to Chronocort. At the beginning of the study, they had 31% of their androgens controlled into the optimal range, and at the end of the study, they had 94% of patients were controlled into the optimal range, which is a highly significant result, not only for us, but also for these patients. We took that data through to the European regulator, and they agreed with us, they agreed the phase 3 study design almost immediately. In fact, it's an adequately powered repeat of a phase 2 study. So the same endpoints, we're looking at the same type of patient population. We just need a larger number of patients in the study to show statistical significance. So we certainly believe this study is as de-risked as it can be in terms of a phase 3 study. That's ongoing at the moment and will read out at the end of this year. In the US, it took us slightly longer to reach consensus with the regulator over there, the FDA. But again, they've eventually agreed. We eventually agreed with a similar study design. Again, we're looking at control of androgens or sex hormones into the optimal range. This time the study is a little bit longer. It's 12 months versus 6 months in Europe, and a slightly broader patient population, 16 plus versus 18 plus in Europe. We've just appointed a CRO to start this study with us, and this study will start at the end of the summer. In terms of our commercialization strategy for the rest of the world, as I mentioned, we've already entered into marketing and distribution agreements in Israel, Australia and New Zealand, and this provides further upside beyond our core territories of Europe and the US. And very recently, just a couple of months ago, we had our Japanese patents granted. It's very important to us. Japan is the third largest pharmaceutical market beyond Europe and the US, and we are now actively seeking a partner to carry out the appropriate clinical trials in Japan and bring our products to market in that territory. So in terms of the outlook for 2018, it remains very exciting. As I've said, since I last presented here last year, we've hit all our milestones that we set out to do. And already this year, Al-Kindi has received market authorisation in Europe. We've launched in Germany and are revenue generating. And you can look out for some further information and news flow on our subsequent activities throughout the rest of this year. So I think with that, I'll finish. And just to say, we are building a global endocrinology specialty pharma company. We have established a strong position in orphan diseases. We have a credible market access strategy, the opportunity to broaden out the offering beyond our 2 lead products. And importantly, we have a strong team which has shown that it can deliver. Thank you very much for your attention.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. So any questions for Martin, please? Hands raised at the front. Hopefully I'll understand them.
For your Al-Kindi product, did you just do, in order to get the license, did you just do PK studies or PK studies plus biomarkers, or did you actually measure a clinical effect?
So for our Al-Kindi studies, we had an agreed plan with the European Medicines Agency, which was called a paediatric investigation plan. Under that plan, we carried out 2 PK type studies in adults, and we carried out a pivotal phase 3 study in the target patient group, which was children 0 to 6 years of age with the disease. In terms of pure patient outcomes, very difficult to do sampling in very young children. So we took children under 6, including children from birth, so newly diagnosed, just 1 month with the disease. But we do have a continuation study which is ongoing, which is capturing some of those clinical benefits and outcomes which not only the regulators but the payers want to see.
Okay. And is there really, for hydrocortisone, the adult dosage form, is it really only available as capsules and tablets? Didn't anybody at any stage develop a liquid or some other dosage form?
No, so what's available currently is it's just tablets in Europe and actually in the US. There was a liquid form developed. It started in the US in the early 2000s. It was proven to be unsafe, so it was and unstable, was withdrawn from the market in the US. In Europe, the use of liquids has been more patchy. There was never an approved liquid preparation in Europe. There were special preparations, particularly for younger children, but now that we have a licensed preparation here in Europe, those specials have to cease because they're unlicensed.
Oh, okay, that's good. I've got one more. On the other one, Chronocort, where you take the thing last thing at night, and I think you said you took another dose in the day sometime. Are they actually different formulations for each one? I'm assuming the nighttime one is some sort of pulse release and the daytime one is some ordinary...
No, so actually it's the same product. It will just usually be a different dose. So one of the advantages of the technology that we use is a multi-particulate technology, so something like Contact 400, which you can see over the counter. It's a very well-precedented technology in the marketplace. Well over 100 products, marketed products use this technology. Absolutely no issue with scale-up. We've been working at commercial scale now for many, many years. And the beauty of this technology is that actually the product is the bead of drug, and you just simply fill the capsule with a differing volume of the beads to get your different dose. So same product, but it'll be a different dose. Okay. And therefore this keeps the cost of goods down.
And lastly, is there a food effect on the PK profile? Do you have to take the product either in a fasted or condition or after a meal?
Yeah, no, very, very good question. So I think as with all drugs, there's usually a food effect. The regulators asked us to look at the food effect with both Al-Kindi and Chronocort. We've carried out those PK studies, and there is a slight food effect, but it delays absorption of the drug, but not significantly. For Al-Kindi, that was put into our submission package. We've also done the same study for Chronocort already. The food effect is not significant.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Okay.
Do you anticipate any negative impact of Brexit?
Again, a very good question, very topical. So we've looked very carefully at our supply chain, particularly in Europe. Our product is manufactured in Germany. It's packaged in the Netherlands, and to mitigate the potential issues of Brexit because, of course, we don't know. We've set up a wholly owned European subsidiary, also based in the Netherlands, to hold our market authorisation. So in actual fact, as I stand here today, we are, as far as I can tell, Brexit proof. The only issue that we can see is potentially post-Brexit actually bringing a drug back into the UK, because we don't know how that will be handled as yet. But in terms of marketing to the rest of Europe, absolutely no issues with Brexit.
I had a quick question, if I may. It's about deficiency diagnosis. How well are cortisol-related conditions diagnosed? Do you think that the market, all the patients are identified, especially I'm thinking amongst the babies and the younger children, identifying any conditions is difficult, isn't it?
It is, and in most countries worldwide, most countries in Europe, there's a simple heel prick test. So particularly for a genetic disease, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, a simple heel prick test is taken at birth and the children are diagnosed that way. Unfortunately, in the UK, there is no such diagnostic test, or it's not available here on cost-effectiveness grounds. It's something that perhaps the UK should look at, because this test is available in places like the Philippines, Thailand, Brazil. UK is one of the few places that doesn't have the test. So unfortunately, the way that children in the UK typically picked up is when we present in a coma with an adrenal crisis, at A&E, and that's how they're picked up using the UK. But worldwide, mostly picked up at birth with the heel prick test if they have CAH.
Any other questions, please? I had a question also about money. Now you've started generating revenue, how you get paid? Do you get paid then from your reselling partners, or do you get paid directly? And then how long does it take once the products are sold between you getting the money?
It goes. The products go to our distributor and then wholesalers, and typical terms are 60 to 90 days. So it's on that basis when you get paid from the pharmacies and the payers in each individual country.
Okay. Any other questions? Martin, I think we're done. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Excellent.